The morning wind swept across Cascade Hollow like a warning, carrying the scent of wet hay, cold metal, and something older, something that clung to forgotten places and wounded things. Beneath the tin roof of the county fairgrounds pavilion, the wooden bleachers creaked under boots and denim. Laughter cracked in the corners. Paper coffee cups steamed in rough hands. It might have been any Saturday, except for the cages. 3 rusted crates lined the auction floor. Inside them, a German shepherd with ribs sharp as fence wire, a heavily pregnant Doberman trembling against the bars, and a Rottweiler whose sheer bulk did little to hide the welts along his spine. The crowd barely looked. When they did, it wasn't kindness in their eyes. Someone near the back spat. A man in a hunting vest snorted, "Look at that mutt, probably bit his last handler." The auctioneer flipped the page on his clipboard. "Next lot," he called out, voice like gravel and rhythm. 3 retired security dogs, some handling required. A ripple of mockery passed through the bleachers. "More like some bullets required," one man muttered to Chuckles. Someone flicked a cigarette butt toward the Rottweiler's cage. The dog didn't move, but the shepherd did, stepping forward, placing his battered frame between the ember and the others. Not aggressive, just there, solid, present, watching. Wade Mercer hadn't planned on staying long. He stood near the back, hands tucked into a field jacket older than most of the kids running the event. 37 years old, former Marine. His boots still carried sand from places most folks here had only seen on the news. Wade had come for feed, maybe a new generator if the price was right. Not this. But when the shepherd lifted his head and locked eyes with him, everything changed. They were the same color as Rangers, that deep autumn amber that held storms behind them. Ranger, the dog who had dragged him through fire outside Sangin. The one who had taken a bullet meant for him. The one who had died under Wade's shaking hands, his last breath full of dust and blood and loyalty. The shepherd in the cage stared at him like he'd been waiting. Wade moved forward without realizing it, the murmur of the crowd fading into the background hum of old nightmares. He saw now, up close, the damage. The shepherd's left flank bore a star-shaped burn scar, his back paw twisted ever so slightly when he shifted weight, like an old injury never set right. But his posture was straight, his eyes steady. He wasn't begging. He was commanding. Beside him, the Doberman panted heavily, belly taut and low. A torn ear folded awkwardly over her cheek, and her sides heaved with shallow breaths. She didn't cower. She pressed her body towards the shepherd like she knew he'd absorb the worst of what might come. And the Rottweiler, larger than any Wade had seen, didn't bark or growl. He simply leaned into the other 2, his head bowed like a shield ready to fall. The auctioneer tapped the microphone. "Starting bid, 300 for the lot." 300 for all of them. A man in a camo jacket raised a hand lazily. 350. I can train the Rottie for home defense. 4. Another shouted. Doberman'll make me a few pups before she's done. 5. Someone else laughed. Strip 'em down, sell parts. Wade's jaw tightened. His breath slowed. He scanned the crowd. None of them saw what he saw. They didn't see the way the shepherd's ears flicked at every shout, tracking, assessing. They didn't see the way the Rottweiler kept glancing sideways toward the Doberman's belly. They didn't see the part that mattered. They only saw damage. Wade saw survival. 600, barked the man in camo again. 750, said another. The bids climbed, not out of mercy, but because blood always drew sharks. Wade tasted copper on his tongue. The part of him that once cleared rooms in Kandahar began to stir. 800, 9. 10. Someone grunted, loud and smug. The auctioneer chuckled, rubbing his hands. Hot ticket today, folks. Do I hear 11? And then Wade's voice cut through the din. 9,000. he said, calm, clear, deadly quiet. For all of them. Silence dropped like a curtain. The auctioneer froze mid-grin. Heads turned. Someone coughed. The camo-jacketed man swore under his breath. Did he say 9? Wade didn't move. His hands were still in his pockets. His eyes never left the shepherd's. The dog blinked once, then sat, as if something had just shifted. A girl with a camera, high school age, denim jacket frayed at the sleeves, lowered her lens to her chest. Her lips parted, breath caught. The auctioneer stammered, "Sir, that's well above market." "I know what I'm buying," Wade said. He stepped forward, bills already folded in his back pocket. The crowd murmured again, unsure whether to laugh or clap. No one spoke loud enough to interrupt the moment. The shepherd pressed his head against the bars, watching Wade move. And Wade thought, not of now, but of fire, of bullets, of a dog's chest rising once, then stilling forever. He nodded once, slow. "I'm taking all of them." The gavel struck wood. The sound didn't echo. It landed. And somewhere inside that cage, the 3 broken dogs exhaled together. Like maybe, just maybe, someone had finally come back for them. The road back to the lake curled like a question through the trees. Wade drove slow, careful, the tires humming over frost-etched gravel. In the bed of his truck, beneath a secured tarp, 3 cages rattled with the breath and weight of lives he'd just gambled everything on. Arrow lay pressed against the back bars, ribs visible through his coat, but his ears flicked at every turn like radar. Bear shifted restlessly, the metal groaning beneath his weight. Nyx stayed curled tight, her belly, round and taut, her breath hitching every few minutes. The pups inside her were close. The old boathouse stood at the edge of Pine Water Lake, where fog hovered low over the water and crows tracked the sky like sentries. It had belonged to Wade's uncle once, a fisherman who died years ago and left behind creaking floorboards, salt-stained windows, and silence. Wade parked and killed the engine. Mist rolled in behind him as he unlocked the padlock and swung the wide doors open. The hinges moaned. Inside it smelled of dried cedar, old rope, and time. It wasn't much, but it was enough. He cleared the far corner first, laying out blankets and straw. The floor was swept, heaters pulled from the truck and plugged into an old generator. He tested the outlets, filled bowls with fresh water, then turned to the cages. Arrow stepped out first, one paw at a time, tail low but steady. His head moved in slow arcs, reading every shadow, every draft. Then he turned back to check on the others. Bear came next, a massive shadow with shoulders like a small bull. He paused, as if unsure the floor wouldn't give beneath him. But when Wade knelt down and held out a hand, Bear didn't growl or pull back. He simply exhaled, deep and gravelly, then ambled past Wade into the straw. Nyx trembled as she stood. Wade moved slow, letting her lean against the open crate door. She staggered 2 steps before he caught her. She didn't bite, didn't resist. Just let her head rest against his shoulder as he guided her to the makeshift whelping corner he'd set up with towels and a crate, split open for easier access. She dropped into the nest, panting. Arrow stayed at the door, body tense, facing outward. Even now he refused comfort. He chose duty. Wade said nothing. He just nodded at the dog and turned back inside. 3 hours passed like a field op. Wade moved between stations, refilling bowls, adjusting heat, rubbing life back into his hands. Bear nosed the corner where fishnets once hung, then found a patch of light and collapsed with a grunt. Nyx had started labor. Short contractions came in waves, her body coiled in pain. At dusk, headlights swept across the trees, then cut. Wade rose, instinct flaring. A small car door shut. Gravel shifted under boots. The knock on the frame was quick, assertive. "You, Mercer?" The woman in the doorway didn't wait for an answer. Late 30s, slim, wind-reddened cheeks and dark curls jammed into a haphazard bun. She wore a worn canvas coat over scrubs, mud on her sneakers, a clipboard tucked under one arm. Her eyes were sharp, not the kind that asked permission. "Dr. Lena Ortiz. Kaylee called me. She said you brought home 3 broken dogs and one of them's about to drop puppies. I assumed she was exaggerating. Apparently not." Wade stepped aside. "I don't like people in my space." "I'm not people," Lena said. "I'm the vet." She breezed past him, scanning the room. When she spotted Nix, her expression changed. Not pity, calculation. Her bag hit the floor. She rolled up her sleeves. "You've got about an hour before she crashes." "Kaylee's here?" Wade asked. Lena glanced up. "She's behind me." Kaylee Jensen appeared in the doorway a moment later, backpack slung over one shoulder, camera in hand, her face flushed from the cold. She was 16, maybe 17, with a blunt-cut ponytail and boots too big for her. She held the camera like armor. "Didn't know who else would come," she said. Wade looked at her, then back at Lena, who was already pulling gloves on. "Not my first field birth," Lena muttered, lifting Nix's leg gently, checking vitals. "But it's going to be close. She's dehydrated, overstressed, scar tissue on the abdomen, looks like an old C-section. If these pups come wrong, she won't survive." "Tell me what to do," Wade said. Lena pointed toward the sink. "Wash, sterile if you can. You're holding if I cut." Wade moved. Fast, without hesitation. Something about the woman's tone flipped a switch in him. Orders, urgency, he could handle that. Kaylee stood off to the side, wide-eyed but steady. Bear lumbered over to her, his thick tail thumping once. He nudged her leg. She didn't flinch. Instead, she sank to the floor beside him. Her fingers curled into the fur behind his ear. "Good boy," she whispered. "You're okay now." Arrow had not moved. Still at the door, still watching. As Lena set up for the worst-case scenario, Wade knelt beside Nix, one hand against her trembling side. "You're safe here," he said. He didn't know if she understood, but he needed to say it. The first pup came at 9:47, slick, tiny, alive. The second followed 10 minutes later, breathing shallow but steady. The third did not come. Nix strained. Lena's hands moved faster. "This one's stuck," she snapped. "Cord twisted." Wade held Nix's shoulders while Lena worked, her breath a string of whispered curses and prayers. Kaylee pressed herself flat to the wall, camera forgotten, face pale. Bear whined low in his chest. Arrow's ears flicked once, but he didn't move. And then Lena stilled. "Got him," she said. She lifted the third pup into the air, a lifeless bundle. She rubbed, hard, again, then again. Silence. Then a squeak, small, defiant. Wade's exhale cracked in the middle. Kaylee covered her mouth. Lena looked up. "All 3. You've got all 3. Wade nodded once. His hand still rested on Nix, who had stopped trembling. She was asleep. No, not asleep. Peaceful. Safe. Lena leaned back, stripped her gloves off with one snap, and let her breath out slow. "You got lucky, Marine." "I've had worse odds," Wade said. The light from the kerosene heater glowed amber across the wooden walls. Outside, the lake hissed softly against the dock. Inside, 4 humans and 3 scarred dogs breathed the same warm air. For the first time in a long time, they weren't running from anything. They were waiting to begin. By the second night on the lake, the boathouse smelled of straw, antiseptic, and damp wood. Wade had worked the place into a kind of field hospital, heaters humming, water bowls lined up, charts pinned to a nail on the wall. It wasn't enough. He could feel it in Nix's shallow panting, see it in the tremor of her belly. The pups were coming too soon. Lena Ortiz arrived before dawn, hair still damp from a rushed shower, boots unlaced. She dropped her bag on the bench and pulled out vials and instruments, muttering to herself as she set a sterile field on the table. "We're out of time," she said. "Get her up here." Wade crouched by Nix's corner. The Doberman's eyes were glassy but alert, fixed on him as if she knew what was coming. He slid his arms under her, felt the tremor of muscle under skin, the heat of her labor. She didn't resist. She let her head drop against his shoulder as he carried her to the table Lena had cleared. Straw clung to his jacket. "Arrow, back," Wade said softly. The shepherd obeyed, but not far. He moved to the threshold, planted himself with his spine against the jamb, one ear toward the lake, the other on the room. He didn't blink. He didn't lie down. He was the door. Kaylee hovered in the corner, her camera forgotten in its bag. She twisted her fingers together until her knuckles whitened. Bear shifted across the floor, nails clicking. He came to Kaylee, pressing his scarred head into her lap, as if he'd read the panic in her body. She bent over him, forehead to his, and whispered something Wade couldn't hear. Bear's eyes closed, a low rumble rising from his chest, not quite a growl, not quite a purr. Lena snapped on gloves. "She's dilated, but the first pup's breach. We need to go in. Mercer, you're holding her steady. Kaylee, keep the other two calm." Wade scrubbed his hands at the sink, the way he'd done before surgeries overseas. He remembered blood and dust and surgeons working with nothing but headlamps and willpower. He came back, steadied Nix, as Lena made her first incision. Nix flinched but didn't cry out. Wade murmured to her, voice low, steady, a cadence built in fire zones. "You're okay, you're safe, you've got this." He wasn't sure if he was talking to her or himself. Lena's hands moved fast and sure. "First one," she said, and lifted a slick, tiny pup into the air. It squeaked, fragile but alive. Kaylee gasped, then clapped a hand over her mouth. Bear nudged her knee as if to anchor her. The second pup came smaller, slower, its breath catching. Lena rubbed it briskly with a towel, whispering under her breath. A thin cry rose, weak but present. She placed both pups on a warming pad she'd improvised from a heating mat and a towel. "2. We're halfway." Then Nix's body jerked. Her heart monitor, jerry-rigged from a small portable unit Lena had brought, flattened to a single tone. "Stay with me," Lena snapped. Her hands moved to compress Nix's chest. She injected something clear from a syringe, pressed hard again. "Come on, girl." Wade's stomach went cold. He'd felt this before, breath slowing, time narrowing. He pressed his forehead to Nix's flank. "Not today," he whispered. "You're not going today." Arrow rose from the doorway, hackles up, eyes fixed on the table. He didn't make a sound, but the air around him shifted. Bear whined low, deep in his chest, but didn't move from Kaylee's lap. Lena kept working, sweat shining at her hairline. Respiratory arrest. She muttered, "One more dose." She injected again, massaged Nix's chest, bent close, breathing into her muzzle. "Breathe, sweetheart." A long moment, nothing but the beep of the heater, the shallow cries of the newborn pups. Then a flicker on the monitor. A blip. Another. The line steadied into a rhythm. Weak, but there. Lena exhaled hard, dropping her shoulders. She's back. Wade's head stayed bowed against Nix's side until he felt the rise of her ribs under his palm. Only then did he let out the breath he'd been holding. Kaylee wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, embarrassed at the tears streaking her cheeks. Bear stayed pressed to her until she laughed once, shaky but real. Lena stripped off her gloves, her voice steady now. 2 pups alive. Mother stable, that's the best we're going to get tonight. Wade touched Nix's head, fingers brushing her torn ear. She stirred faintly, one eye cracking open to look at him. Not gratitude. Recognition. Arrow stepped forward, crossing the threshold at last. He came to the table, placed his front paws on the edge, and leaned his head near Nix's flank. She breathed out, slow. The shepherd lowered his muzzle toward the pups, not touching, just watching, amber eyes steady. Wade saw it then, not just protection, but something older. Memory. Duty. In the dim light of the boathouse, the four of them, Marine, vet, teenager, and 3 broken dogs, formed a quiet perimeter around new life. Outside, the lake slapped softly against the dock. Inside, the heater hummed. No one spoke. It felt like a war zone after the shooting stopped, when you count the living and realize, against the odds, they're still breathing. Wade straightened, his hands shaking. "We keep them alive," he said. "All of them." Lena nodded. Kaylee stroked Bear's head. Arrow stayed by the door again. But this time, when he lay down, his head was up, eyes open, the sentry still at his post. By the end of the week, the boathouse no longer felt like a shelter cobbled together out of desperation. It had a rhythm now. Feedings, walks, medication. Straw changed twice a day. The pups, tiny and pink-bellied, squealed and stretched between their mother's legs, always reaching, always hungry. Nix barely moved except to nudge them closer. Bear took to sunbathing on the dock like he'd always lived there. And Arrow kept watch, always. Wade didn't say much. He worked in the same way he had during deployment, with quiet purpose, shoulders tight, movements efficient. He woke before dawn, checked vitals, logged temperatures on a clipboard like he was still reporting to command. He didn't ask for help, but help came anyway. Kaylee showed up every day after school, boots muddy, camera swinging from her shoulder. She never asked permission anymore. She just slipped in through the side door, fed Bear a biscuit, and began filming. "Boathouse Souls," she said one afternoon, typing the words into the YouTube channel she'd created on her laptop. It needed a name. Wade arched an eyebrow. People really want to watch dogs lying in straw? People want to believe in something, she said. She uploaded the first video that night, a slow pan of Arrow pacing the dock in tight, disciplined circles as Wade gave quiet commands. Sit, stay, heel. The shepherd obeyed with sharp precision, his ribs still too visible, his ears flicking with each word. The clip ended with a close-up of his eyes, those amber, storm-colored eyes, and a title, 2 hours in, Arrow walks like a soldier. By morning, the video had 700 views. By evening, it had 12,000. Kaylee didn't stop. She filmed Bear collapsing mid-stay command, tongue lolling sideways in a dramatic flop. She filmed Nix licking her pups gently, while Arrow stood guard, his body coiled but still. She added soft music, slow dissolves, black and white filters. She edited late into the night, under the glow of her bedroom lamp, the sounds of her mother snoring behind a closed door. She wasn't just showing dogs, she was telling a story. And people listened. Local teachers started sharing the videos in classrooms. A bakery downtown left dog treats by the register marked, "For Arrow and Friends." A veteran named Dennis, who hadn't spoken in group therapy in 2 years, showed up to the clinic with a box of homemade blankets. "For the dogs," he said, then quietly, "and for what they bring back." But not everyone felt the same. One morning, Wade found a letter nailed to the boathouse door, typed, centered, folded twice with the precision of someone who liked rules more than people. "To whom it may concern," it read, "I represent the Lakeshore Ridge Homeowners Association. As head of Community Safety and Historical Preservation, I must formally express concern over the presence of 3 dogs of combat lineage being housed near public access points. These animals, though possibly rescued with good intentions, pose a serious risk to the community, particularly to children and the elderly. I am requesting immediate evaluation by County Animal Control and possible removal pending behavioral assessment. Signed, Marjorie Lentz, HOA President. Wade held the letter between 2 fingers, rereading it slowly. He didn't say a word, just folded it, once, then again, and tucked it into the side of the clipboard. Across the room, Arrow watched him. Didn't blink, just watched. That afternoon, Wade nailed a new sign to the edge of the boathouse porch. Black paint, block letters. Private property. Rehab in progress. Respect the process. Kaylee filmed it. The pushback didn't end there. The video comments started to split. This is beautiful work. Thank you for saving them. Are these even safe dogs? Isn't the shepherd the one from that security raid last year? How do we know they won't snap? Kaylee stared at the screen, her jaw tight. Her mother stood behind her, arms crossed. They're scared. Her mum said, Some folks don't know what to do with broken things. Makes them nervous. They're not broken. Kaylee snapped. Her mum just nodded. Then show them that. So she did. The next video was different. No music, no edits, just raw footage of Arrow lying outside the crate while Nix fed her pups, his tail twitching every time one squealed. Bear rolled over onto his back, massive paws flopping sideways like a dog who had forgotten what chains felt like. Wade sat beside them, silent, his hand resting gently on Arrow's back. Just that. Stillness. Trust. The clip ended with a single caption. Healing looks like this. Within 2 days, it had 100,000 views. By the end of the week, someone from the local news called, then the regional rescue group, then a woman from DC who ran a foundation for retired working dogs. But tension simmered just beneath. People were watching, yes, but they were also questioning, asking for permits, wanting background checks. The mayor received 3 formal complaints, 1 anonymous tip to the sheriff. Marjorie Lentz walked her spaniel past the boathouse twice a day now, slowing near the fence, her lips pressed tight. She hadn't spoken to Wade yet, but she would. Conflict was coming. Wade knew that feeling, the slow build of pressure, the silence before breach. The question wasn't whether it would come, it was who would hold the line when it did. And for now, Wade had 3 reasons, all sleeping under one roof, to make sure it wasn't the dogs who paid for other people's fear. The man in the grey Mercedes arrived on a Tuesday morning just after the fog lifted off the lake. He stepped out clean and practiced, coat sharp, shoes polished like he hadn't touched gravel in years. He didn't knock. He waited. Wade saw him through the window and didn't move. Not right away. Visitor, Wade said quietly. Arrow stood, ears up, body shifting from rest to readiness in one smooth motion. Bear lumbered towards the door but paused halfway, sensing the tension. Nix remained curled around her pups, one eye open. Wade opened the door without a word. Mr. Mercer, the man said, voice clipped. Neil Granger, Regional Director, Fort Glass Security Solutions. Wade didn't offer a handshake. Never. Heard of it. You will. Granger pulled a leather folder from under his arm, flipped it open with the sort of flourish reserved for courtrooms and boardrooms. Inside were laminated documents, photos, printouts with government-style headers. These dogs, he said, tapping the top page, were part of a retired asset inventory for one of our private canine training units. We believe they were misallocated in a liquidation auction. That auction may not have been properly sanctioned. Wade's jaw tightened. You're saying they were stolen? I'm saying, Granger corrected, They may have been sold under a clerical error. The paperwork you presented, the one tied to your purchase, that was filed under a vendor ID that hasn't been active in 4 years. We've already initiated a formal inquiry. They were starved, chained, half dead. That's unfortunate, Granger said, but irrelevant to ownership. Arrow stepped forward, shoulders tense. Granger noticed. I understand your attachment, he added, especially to the shepherd. Looks like an older line. Solid frame, impressive instinct. Likely came through our tactical imprinting program. Dogs like him are valuable. Wade didn't blink. He's not for sale. No, Granger said, voice silk turning to steel. But he may still be ours. He left a packet on the porch and walked back to his car. Didn't look back. Wade stood there for a long time, hand resting on Arrow's neck. Inside, Kaylee hovered near the stove, frozen mid-step. He sounded like he was here to take them. He was, Wade said. He brought the folder inside, spread the documents out across the workbench. It was clean on the surface, logos, barcodes, technical language. But the feeling in Wade's gut said something else. Too clean. Too fast. Lena arrived 10 minutes later. She'd gotten the same call Granger had hinted at. A request for all medical records related to the dogs. A compliance audit, he'd called it. He's got someone watching the clinic, she said. One of my vet techs said a guy in a blazer took photos through the front window this morning. Kaylee's voice trembled. Can they take them? Legally? If they prove the dogs were misappropriated company assets, and if the auction was invalid. Maybe. Wade didn't flinch. He just said, then we hit first. Lena looked at him. How? He slid a folder from the top shelf. It was old. Dusty. Inside was a single photo, yellowing at the edges. A young man in desert fatigues crouching beside a German shepherd. The dog's ears were torn, his eyes fierce. The name on his vest patch, Ranger. He saved my life outside Sangin, Wade said. Dragged me through sand and shrapnel with a busted hip. Took a round meant for me. Lena nodded slowly. Arrow looks like him. Same frame, same posture, same stare. You think he's related? I think we need to find out. That afternoon, they drew blood. Arrow didn't flinch when the needle entered his vein. He sat perfectly still as Lena worked, his eyes on Wade the whole time. As if he knew this mattered, as if something in his body remembered where it came from. They packed the samples in dry ice and shipped them to a Department of Defense genetic database in Colorado. Lena had a former colleague who owed her a favor. A quiet one. While they waited, Kaylee filmed. She edited a new video that night, the footage darker, quieter. Arrow pacing the boathouse as Wade ran him through drills. Bear snoring on the dock, his paw twitching in dreams. Nix resting beside her pups, the scar on her ear catching the light. Then the camera zoomed on a printout of the photo of Ranger laid beside a still of Arrow. Text rolled across the screen. What if the dog who saved a Marine left behind more than memory? The video hit 50,000 views in 24 hours. 3 days later, the results arrived. Lena opened the email in Wade's truck, parked along the lake road. The subject line was clinical. The message wasn't. Confirmed genetic markers. Arrow shares lineage with Tactical Group Alpha, unit deployed between 2006 and 2010. Cluster match consistent with Service Dog ID, Ranger 457. Wade didn't speak. He stared out at the lake, his hand resting on Arrow's head, fingers tangled in the shepherd's fur. He whispered, almost to himself. You came back. Arrow didn't move. But he leaned in, just a little. Just enough. Back in town, Granger filed a second complaint. But by then, the internet had seen the video. Veterans groups had shared it. The story had started to grow. and somewhere in a backroom office, a corporate file labeled Reclaim Assets Boathouse quietly disappeared from the Fort Glass drive. The paperwork might say ownership, but blood said something else. The order came with a knock on the boathouse door at dawn. 2 county deputies in state-issued jackets held a clipboard, eyes fixed somewhere over Wade's shoulder as they read the notice aloud. Temporary seizure for evaluation, behavioral risk assessment, mandatory holding period 72 to 120 hours. Wade stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "They're not evidence, they're living creatures." "We don't make the rules," one deputy said. "We just serve the order." Behind him, Arrow had already sensed the shift. The shepherd paced in a tight arc, ears flat, eyes flicking from uniform to uniform. Bear planted himself in front of Nix, who curled protectively around her pups, her body trembling. Kaylee stood off to the side, her camera bag limp in her hands, her face pale. "You'll treat them like lives," Wade said quietly. "Not like cargo." The younger deputy swallowed. "Dr. Ortiz can accompany them." She signed off on the transfer. Lena emerged from the back room, hair loose from its bun, stethoscope still around her neck. "I didn't sign off. I said I'd follow them." She said, "If you take them, I'm going too." The men hesitated, then nodded. "You can ride in the transport van." Arrow was the first crated. He went in under Wade's command, but his body trembled, his eyes locked on the door until it shut. Bear resisted, pushing back against the handlers until Kaylee pressed her forehead to his and whispered, "It's okay, big guy. I'll see you soon." Only then did he step inside. Nix had to be carried, her legs too weak, her milk drying up from stress. The van doors slammed. The engine growled. Wade watched it pull away, his fists curling at his sides. The state facility sat on the edge of an old industrial park, a squat concrete block surrounded by chain-link fence and floodlights humming like insects. Inside, the kennels smelled of bleach and fear. Barking ricocheted off cinder block walls, sharp and hollow. Arrow paced the length of his cage, his ribs taut, ears flicking at every metallic clang. The discipline that had once steadied him frayed with each whip crack from a distant hallway where handlers broke up scuffles. His tail stayed low, his eyes bright but restless. Nix lay curled in the corner, pups pressed to her belly. Her milk dwindled under stress, her ears twitching at every shout. She licked the pups tirelessly, trying to will them full. Her body shook from exhaustion. Bear scraped at his gate until his claws bled. The chain of his collar had twisted, a jagged edge biting into his neck. Blood clotted where it rubbed raw. He shoved his nose through the bars, whining, desperate for the smell of the people he trusted. That evening, Kaylee showed up at the front desk. Jeans tucked into worn boots, jacket zipped to her chin. She handed over an old volunteer badge from a Humane Society project. The guard barely looked, distracted by a phone call. 10 minutes, the receptionist warned, tone kind but tired. Kaylee nodded and walked the row of kennels, boots squeaking on concrete. She kept her eyes forward, passing lunging dogs until she saw them. Arrow stiffened at the sight of her, then relaxed slightly, head low. Nix raised her head only because a friend had come. Bear sagged against the bars, a low groan escaping his chest. Kaylee dropped to her knees at his gate. That's when she saw the collar, twisted wire biting into flesh, fur matted with blood. "Oh, Bear," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, I didn't know." Her fingers fumbled at the latch. Protocol said call a handler. But Bear's whimper shredded protocol. She tugged, twisted. The gate squealed open. He didn't lunge. He didn't bolt. He pressed his massive head into her lap, breath hot with desperation. She pulled the collar free. The wire clattered to the floor. She stroked him, whispering apologies through her tears. Arrow barked sharply. A warning. Nix's pups squealed in chorus. Kaylee glanced down the corridor. Empty for now. You have to run, she whispered into Bear's ear. Follow the lake. Find the wind. Alarms shattered the silence. Red lights flashed overhead. The automated system triggered by an unlatched gate. Doors slammed open at the far end. Boots thundered against concrete. Kaylee could have run, could have pretended ignorance. Instead, she stayed kneeling, hands raised. It was me, she shouted. Don't blame them. 2 guards came fast. Hank Barryman, barrel-chested, nose crooked from too many breaks, suspicion in his eyes. Carla Ruiz, younger, dark-haired, voice low but tense. What the hell did you do? Barryman barked. She's just a kid. Ruiz muttered, but her eyes darted to Bear, pressing close against Kaylee. Before either could act, Arrow threw his weight against his gate. Metal popped. He slipped free, nails skittering across the floor. Nix followed, ribs showing, pups nudged along by sheer maternal drive. For a heartbeat, chaos ruled. Dogs, guards, alarms! Someone shouted down the hall. Kaylee's voice cut through. Go, run to the woods, find the water, go! Arrow turned, amber eyes meeting hers. No hesitation, only recognition. He surged down the corridor, Nix and Bear close behind. The emergency exit slammed wide, cold air flooding in, pine and lake scent riding the wind. By the time Barryman lunged forward, the dogs were gone, shadows swallowed by autumn dark, carried toward freedom. Kaylee remained, shoulders squared, tears streaking her face, but voice steady. It was me. I let them out. She didn't resist when Ruiz took her elbow gently. Barryman fumed, threatening charges, shouting about danger. Kaylee ignored him. Her last words were to the empty hallway. Come back when it's safe. I'll wait. And somewhere beyond the fences, Arrow glanced back once, then again, his gaze a silent oath before vanishing into night. The knock came just past midnight, sharp and deliberate against the wooden door of the boathouse. Wade had been sitting at the workbench, cleaning Arrow's old collar, the one they'd taken off before the seizure. His body tensed. He wasn't expecting anyone. Arrow lifted his head from the blankets near the wood stove. Bear, curled at the back with his side still bruised from the escape, gave a low grunt, but didn't rise. Nix stirred slightly, instinct humming beneath her exhaustion. Wade opened the door slowly, hand near the hammer he kept beside the frame. A man stood in the rain. Skinny, soaked, twitchy. His jacket was 2 sizes too big, a crumpled folder clutched to his chest like a life preserver. Early 40s, maybe, with shaggy hair and the wide-eyed look of someone who hadn't slept in days. I'm Brandon Hale, he said quickly. I worked for Fort Glass. I know what they did. I know what Granger's covering up. Wade didn't move. You're about 2 weeks too late. No, Brandon said, stepping forward. I'm right on time, because they're coming again, and next time they won't leave without taking everything. Wade hesitated, then opened the door wider. Talk. Inside, Brandon sat at the edge of a bench, dripping rain onto the floor. He kept glancing toward the shadows where the dogs lay. Arrow didn't blink. He was watching Brandon the way soldiers watch old buildings in a war zone, like something inside might still explode. Brandon opened the folder. Photographs spilled out, blurry, some taken at night, others clearly shot from behind fences or inside vans. Dogs in cramped cages, scars, muzzles slick with blood, receipts scribbled in shorthand, transport logs marked with initials and crossed-out dates. One stood out, bare, unmistakably younger, but with the same curved scar across his shoulder, locked in a steel pen, jaw swollen, eyes sunken. Wade's fists clenched. "What am I looking at?" "Not security dogs," Brandon said. "Fighters." He shoved a document across the table. Granger didn't run a protection training facility. He ran blood rings across 3 counties. Some dogs came from breeders, some were stolen. Others, like these 3, were dumped when they stopped bringing money. He paused, swallowing. "I handled Bear. He wouldn't bite, ever. Granger called him dead weight. Nix. She fought once. Just once. After that, she wouldn't go near the ring again. She nearly lost her litter last time. Arrow, he was never meant for it. He was one of the few dogs bought in bulk, meant for intimidation, not fighting. But he snapped a chain one night when Granger's guy whipped a puppy. He took 3 stitches in the arm. After that, they locked Arrow up and didn't touch him again." Wade stood. He couldn't sit through this. Brandon kept talking. "When Fort Glass shut its front offices, Granger sold the operation underground, changed names, but the paperwork didn't all disappear. I made copies, stashed them when I ran." "You're saying the auction?" "Fake." Brandon nodded. "Staged to clear inventory without eyes on it. The retired security dogs angle was just a cover, but Arrow, Nix, and Bear, they weren't supposed to survive." Wade ran a hand down his face. The fury inside him was a quiet storm now, cold and certain. Kaylee had arrived halfway through, listening from the stairs. Her voice cracked as she asked, "Why now? Why tell us this now?" "Because I saw your videos," Brandon said. "Bear letting kids crawl on him. Arrow walking straight like he's still on patrol. Nix nursing pups she shouldn't even have survived to birth." He looked down at the table. "And because I helped lock them in cages, I can't undo that. But maybe I can help stop it." Lena arrived an hour later, breath fogging as she stepped inside. Wade handed her the folder without a word. She flipped through the documents, her lips tightening, eyes narrowing. "This is enough to open a felony case," she said. "Interstate animal trafficking, illegal, betting, racketeering. This isn't just a rescue story anymore. This is federal." Brandon looked at her. "I can draw you maps, where they kept the others, where the money moved." "You'll testify?" Wade asked. "I'll burn the whole thing down if it means those 3 stay free." Wade nodded once, then looked down at Arrow, who had settled beside his chair again. The dog's body was still thin, but there was a steadiness in the way he held himself now, like something broken had been reforged in the fire of survival. Brandon whispered, "That shepherd. He was never theirs. They were never theirs." The wind outside began to rise. Rain lashed the shingles. But inside the boathouse, something like resolve took root, not just to defend the dogs, but to expose the truth that had tried to bury them. Arrow pressed closer to Wade's leg, tail flicking once. "You hear that?" Wade murmured, almost to himself. Arrow lifted his head. They messed with the wrong pack. The meeting started quiet. Too quiet. It was held in the old Grayson Grange Hall, the same one where the town once hosted harvest dances and pancake breakfasts. But tonight the air crackled with tension. Folding chairs lined up in stiff rows, locals in denim jackets and flannel shirts hunched forward, their faces drawn, guarded. At the front, Mayor Eileen Barker cleared her throat and tapped her notes. "We're here to determine the status of the animals known as Arrow, Nix, and Bear. There will be order, or this meeting will be shut down." Wade sat near the back, arms crossed, face unreadable. Lena stood beside him. Kaylee was seated in the middle row, her hand tight around her camera bag, but for once not filming. Not yet. The town had shown up. Store clerks, dock hands, retired teachers, all divided, all waiting. The side doors burst open before the mayor could continue. Granger walked in like he owned the oxygen. 2 men followed, broad, silent, eyes hard. One carried a chained muzzle. The other held a leash taut with muscle, a brindle pit mix, scarred and snarling, foam at the edge of its mouth. Another dog, lean and red-eyed, trailed behind, its ribs sharp beneath its coat. Gasps spread like a wave. Granger smiled faintly. "Good evening," he said, addressing no one and everyone. "I thought the town deserved to hear both sides. These animals you're fighting for—" He gestured lazily. "They're liabilities. Dangerous by design." Mayor Barker stood. "Mr. Granger, you're not on the agenda." "I make my own," he said smoothly. "These dogs don't belong here. You're all sitting in a room talking about feelings when facts are barking outside." He snapped his fingers. One of the handlers let the brindle dog forward 2 steps. It growled low, eyes scanning the crowd. Arrow returned before anyone heard him. He didn't burst in. He moved like mist, silent, sure. 1 second the aisle was empty, the next the shepherd was there. Bear came next, larger, heavier, slower, but no less determined. Together they emerged from the shadows near the front doors, backs straight, heads high. Gasps turned to murmurs. No one moved. Granger's pit stiffened, ears back, teeth bared. Arrow didn't bark, he didn't growl. He stood directly in front of Lena, blocking her body with his own. Bear moved to Kaylee's side, a wall of black muscle and scarred hide. Nix, behind them both, lay in a travel crate Lena had set near the stage, her pups bundled in a blanket. She looked up, ears half-cocked, but stayed down. She knew her team had returned. Granger's sneer cracked slightly. "They're loose," he spat, "and still aggressive. You see that? They're positioning. They're about to strike." But it wasn't Arrow who struck first. The brindle pit slipped its handler's grip. The chain whipped across the floor. The dog lunged straight toward Lena, mouth wide, snapping. Everything exploded! Arrow moved like lightning, a blur of tan and black, teeth bared, but not to kill. He rammed the pit in midair, shoulder slamming it sideways into a stack of chairs. They crashed to the ground, metal clanging like gunshots. Arrow spun, blocking the dog's escape path. Bear joined in seconds later, not charging, but flanking. He circled low, head down, a tactical wedge opposite Arrow. The pit tried to regroup, growling, teeth flashing again. Arrow gave a low, commanding bark. Not a challenge, but a signal. Bear stepped in, massive paw pressing the other dog's shoulder down. Arrow pinned the muzzle gently with his own, jaws clamped just enough to stop, not injure. The room fell into stunned silence. Even Granger's second dog stayed frozen at the door. The pit stilled. It whimpered once. Arrow released first, Bear backed off. The 2 battered dogs walked back to their people. Not a scratch on the attacking dog, not one drop of blood. Mayor Barker stood behind the podium, speechless. For a heartbeat, the entire town watched in disbelief. Then someone clapped. Soft, unsure, then another, then more. The sound grew, not loud, not frenzied, but certain. "They protected us," someone said. "They didn't hurt a thing." Another whispered. Granger tried to regain footing. "That's not what you saw. That was luck. Reflexes. Next time—" "Next time," Wade said from the back, stepping forward slowly. "They won't need to prove it again." He stood between Arrow and Bear, one hand resting lightly on Arrow's back. "These aren't weapons. They're warriors, and they chose defense over destruction." Kaylee had lifted her camera. This time, she didn't need to narrate. The footage would speak for itself. Lena walked forward. She crouched beside Arrow, stroked his ear once. "That dog, that's discipline. That's restraint." Then she turned to the crowd. "How many people do you know could have done the same?" No one answered. But for the first time, the doubt had fractured. They had seen what the dogs were capable of, not in violence, but in mercy, in precision, in choice. The meeting ended in quiet. Granger left first, but this time without swagger. The townspeople followed, heads low in thought. The storm hadn't passed yet, but something had shifted. Arrow stood at the hall door, watching the dark, not guarding, not tense, just waiting, like a soldier who had done his duty and was ready for the next. The town hall smelled of old pine floors and tension. It was just past dusk. Outside, the sky still carried the last strokes of burnt orange and lavender, but inside, every eye in Cascade Hollow seemed focused on the faded seal at the front of the room. Folding chairs scraped, coats rustled. The chill in the air wasn't from autumn anymore, it was the weight of decision. Mayor Eileen Barker stood at the podium, hands folded neatly. Her voice didn't rise above a steady tone. Tonight we vote, not just on whether 3 dogs stay or go. We vote on what kind of town we are. To her left, Wade Mercer sat in the second row, shoulders squared, jaw set. Arrow lay at his boots, ears alert, his head high and steady. Bear, sprawled just behind Kaylee, gave a soft grunt, shifting his weight as if bored with all the talk. Nix lay curled in a crate off to the side, her pups tucked against her belly. Her breathing was slow but steady, a silent metronome to the tension in the room. Lena sat behind Wade, her arms crossed, expression unreadable. Kaylee had her camera with her, but she wasn't filming tonight. This was bigger than content. This was history. The town's legal advisor, Ms. Tisdale, cleared her throat. The dogs have passed behavior assessments. They've caused no documented harm, but Mr. Granger's legal filings and the petition from residents suggest safety concerns remain. It is the council's role to decide whether the animals are a risk to public welfare or they're not. Someone called out from the back. Heads turned. It was Eli Reardon, who ran the local hardware store. I've seen Bear sit outside my shop for 2 hours without budging. A kid spilled a soda on his tail. He didn't even blink. There was a pause. Then Caroline Flint spoke up, her arms folded tight across her chest. Arrow helped my daughter when she tripped by the lake trail, blocked her from rolling into the rocks. No barking, no panic. Just stood between her and the water until I got there. More murmurs. A slow ripple of testimony moving forward. Still at the front row, Marjorie Lentz stood, prim in her wool coat. Her voice was sharp. One display of discipline doesn't erase training. These animals were bred for combat. That can't be undone. Kaylee spoke before anyone else could. Then why did Arrow hold back? He could have torn that pit apart and didn't. You were there. Marjorie looked away. The mayor sighed. We'll let Mr. Mercer speak before we vote. Wade rose, slowly. Not dramatically. Not with rehearsed lines. He stood like he had in war briefings, calm, clear, unshaken. He looked across the faces of Cascade Hollow. People he knew, people he didn't. And then he spoke. I'm not here to tell you what kind of dogs they are. You've seen it yourselves. He paused. Arrow shifted slightly at his feet, but didn't move. I carried Ranger across sand and gunfire, a military dog who gave his life pulling me out of a blast zone in Helmand. I never asked him to. He just did it, because that's what loyalty looks like. A breath caught somewhere in the room. When I saw Arrow that day at the auction, I knew. Not because he looked like Ranger, but because he looked at me like Ranger did. With trust, with readiness, with a kind of soul that doesn't lie. He looked down at Arrow, then back at the crowd. If you need someone to blame for bringing them here, blame me. I chose them. I bought them. I fed them. I stood between them and the system trying to erase them. He paused again. His voice didn't waver. I carried Ranger. I'll carry these 3 too. Silence followed, not empty but thick with held breath. Even Marjorie didn't speak. Mayor Barker's voice broke the hush. Very well. We'll put it to a vote. She raised her hand. all in favor of allowing the animals to stay under the protection and care of Wade Mercer, raise your hand. For a moment, nothing moved. Then Eli Reardon lifted his hand. Then Caroline. Then the teenager who stocked shelves at the grocery store. Then Lena. Then slowly, reluctantly, even Marjorie lifted her hand, just halfway. But enough. The mayor's gaze moved across the room, then nodded once. They stay. A collective breath seemed to pass through the walls. Arrow leaned gently into Wade's leg. Nix gave a soft sigh from the crate, one paw tucked protectively over her pups. Bear let out a happy grunt and thumped his tail against the floor, once, then again, like the beat of a drum signaling a new beginning. Wade didn't smile, but his shoulders loosened just a little. Kaylee snapped one photo, then tucked the camera away. No captions, no hashtags, just memory. In a small town in America, 3 dogs once labeled as dangerous had been voted into safety. And no one watching would forget the way they had earned it. Not with teeth, but with truth. Spring returned to Cascade Hollow like a breath held all winter. The ice cracked off the lake in sheets, slipping into dark water that shimmered with second chances. Crocuses nudged up through the thawed soil near the edge of the boathouse, which no longer sagged under years of neglect. The siding had been replaced, the porch repainted. A sign now hung from the rail, carved into reclaimed wood with a soldier's hand and sealed with care. Ranger's Legacy Sanctuary, a place for the dogs who survived inside. The old floorboards were warmed by early sun. The straw had been replaced with thick blankets. The scent of damp and rust was long gone. It now smelled like cedar soap, oatmeal shampoo, and baked kibble. It smelled like healing. Arrow lay across the threshold, spine aligned to the door frame, head lifted just enough to listen without moving. His ears tracked the birds and the children's laughter in equal measure. One paw stretched out across the sunlight, spilling in, the other tucked beneath him in that rigid rest posture all working dogs seemed to prefer. He was home. Bear snoozed in the garden patch near the side fence, stretched long like a log that had always been there. A ball rested between his paws, half chewed, but intact, a gift from a local child. Every now and then he would flick his ear at a fly, grunt, and roll to the cooler side of the dirt. Nix watched her growing pups from under the maple tree near the picnic benches. Her torn ear twitched as 2 boys raced past her, laughing as they dropped kibble into tiny bowls. She didn't move. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough. Wade stood on the porch, a mug of black coffee in one hand, his other resting gently on Arrow's back. He wore a different kind of uniform now. Boots still scuffed, but jeans softer, his shirt untucked. The scar over his brow had faded, but it still caught light when he turned just right. Behind him, Lena was calling commands in a calm, assertive voice. A group of veterans moved across the back field with dogs at their sides, some limping, some scarred, all learning. She was running her first trauma-informed canine handling class, pairing rescued dogs with former soldiers. She had waited years to make this happen. Wade had built it with her, one nail, one trust exercise, one breath at a time. Kaylee stood in the middle of it all, her camera rolling as if it were part of her. The wind played in her hair as she walked backward, filming the group, pausing only to kneel down and whisper encouragement to a jittery yellow mutt named Cricket. Around her neck was a lanyard with a laminated tag, Statewide Student Filmmaker Winner. The dogs who stayed. She didn't brag about it. She didn't need to. The sanctuary had become more than shelter. It was proof that survival wasn't enough. Healing was possible. Proof that some wounds didn't close until someone leaned in and stayed. Proof that even in a world as fractured as this one, loyalty could still rebuild something whole. At noon, the gate opened. Children arrived from a nearby school. They brought peanut butter treats and soft voices. Bear dragged himself up to greet them with a yawn and a tail like a slow metronome. Arrow didn't move. He watched. Always. Nix allowed the bravest ones to sit beside her, gently nudging her grown pups closer. Inside, the video team Kaylee had pulled together, mostly teens with tripods and stubborn hearts, finished setting up for the final shot of the film. "Camera ready," one of them whispered. Kaylee adjusted the lens and looked toward Wade. He was quiet for a moment. Then he stepped forward, kneeling beside Arrow. He rested his hand gently on the shepherd's shoulder, eyes never leaving the camera. "I once carried a dog named Ranger through war," he said. "He saved my life when I didn't know I wanted it saved, and when I found Arrow I thought I was just returning a favor. But the truth is, he carried me again. So did Bear, so did Nix, and they're not the only ones out there who need a second shot." He paused. "If you're watching this, maybe you've been through something too. Or maybe you know someone who has. Maybe you've loved a dog like this. One with eyes that saw more than words ever could." Wade looked down at Arrow, then back at the lens. "So here's my question." The camera zoomed in slowly. The dogs stirred around him. The wind shifted through the grass. "What's your story with a loyal pet?" Fade out. The screen turned black. Then a single line of white text appeared. "Subscribe to German Shepherd Project for stories that fight like hell and love harder. Ranger's legacy lives on. So should theirs."